This is Burn This Book, a podcast where we, Nicole and Eden, read a banned or challenged book twice a month and discuss its meaning, impact, and censorship to make it more accessible for all readers. This week's book is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, which was published in 2019. Eden is going to give a brief summary of the book, and then we'll introduce our guest, who we're very excited to have with us.
Yes.
Yay.
So a brief summary of this book. This book is a book-length letter from a 20-year-old Vietnamese American son to his mother, who does not read or speak English. And it's just about his life as an immigrant in the United States. It goes back and forth between like the traumas of the Vietnam War, going into the traumas of just being trauma might be too big of a word for being an immigrant where they are, but
I think it's an appropriate word.
Is that an appropriate word? Appropriate word.
So.
Yeah. The trauma of being an immigrant in the United States, which is like learning how to live and coexist with each other with PTSD, with mental illness. It's like semi-autobiographical, but the main character is, he's nicknamed Little Dog. He is also gay, and it's also about his first love, first heartbreak, all of that.
Awesome.
Anything else to add?
No, I think that was great. And maybe our guest, I'm really teeing this up to make it seem like Ocean Vuong is on.
Yeah.
I just realized that. But honestly, even cooler, in my opinion, is our guest, Alyanna, who lives in LA. And she reached out to us, and she's a listener and an avid reader. We're so happy to have Alyanna on our podcast. And what is your connection to the book, Alyanna? Why did you want to do this to yourself?
Yeah. Honestly, I just came into it. I remember I first came across it in 2020, and I just immediately fell in love with Ocean Vuong's writing style. I first read his book of poetry, Night Sky with Exit Wounds, and then like right after I read this one, and it was one of those books, as basic as it sounds. I just remember thinking the title was like so beautiful.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
Like, wow. And honestly, I went into it thinking it was his second poetry book. Like, that's genuinely what I thought. And then, like, because I just picked it up, I was like, okay, I'm going to read all of his stuff. Because I'm not really a big poetry fan, to be honest. And so I think that's why I was really drawn to his writing. Because for some reason, I was like, this is really beautiful to me. And it kind of opened my eyes to like other poetry. So I feel like it was just, I don't know. He's just one of those writers that I like think about passages of his, because I was like,
oh, I love that.
It's just so beautiful. And so, yeah, I feel like my connection to it isn't really anything profound. I'm just like, I'm a fan. I think it was only recently that he had posted about it, that it had been banned, I think, in like Conroe, Texas. And that's when I wanted to like reread it, just because I was like, why and so yeah, that's where I'm coming from, just like as a his writing, honestly.
I love that. I love that he's kind of your gateway drug into poetry, generally.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like, I don't know, it's just one of those genres I like don't find myself gravitating towards. And then when I do, I think before I wouldn't let it like sit with me. I would just kind of read it like in a day and be like, okay, that was fine.
Yeah.
And maybe it was because it was the pandemic. I was like wanting something that was, I don't know, more like escapism probably isn't the right word, but just something that I was like, this is beautiful and I just want to read like beautiful things right now. So I think the time that I had like discovered him, I feel like was why it made it so impactful maybe, but I don't know.
I love that. I also think like in order to read this, I think I walked in thinking it was like a novel, like going to be like a linear, like full story. So that's why I have mixed feelings about this book. But I think it's the kind of book where you do have to sit with it and take your time with it. And then it becomes like a much more emotive experience. Like it becomes a lot more emotional because there are passages and there are just like little, like just phrases that I was like, whoa, that's incredible. Wow. you have to treat it like poetry because it's not going to be like any other novel. And I came in thinking it was going to be like another novel. So I was like, what is he doing? Ocean, chill out. Give me some, give me a little bit more of a thread through here. So that was like frustrating for me because I kept getting confused.
Totally.
I think there was like an emotional thread though. Where it is linear is the emotion, because I felt like I felt the emotion with him, and then like we wove in and out, even though everything around it didn't seem to be connected at all.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah, so I did love that.
Yeah, I feel like you saying that is like a great way to put it. That like the emotional thread of it, like I feel like I could really follow his journey in that sense. Mm-hmm. And then it wasn't until the end of it that I feel like you can zoom out and like understand how everything connects. And because I also felt that like while I was reading it, just like a bit frustrated with like, and what are we talking about now?
Tiger Woods, okay.
Like, that was a lot of Tiger Woods and then no Tiger Woods again, and I'd be like,
yeah,
follow through, my friend. The way I described it is it felt like I was getting motion sickness. It wasn't like extreme jolts, but it was like enough of like turns and twists that I was, and not twists plot wise, but like who we're focusing on. So the book is split up in 3 parts, and the first part is mostly Little Dog, the protagonist's nickname, and his mother and grandmother. But then the second part is more about their relationship, their first like love affair with a very distraught American white boy. And then the third part kind of weaves it all back together. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. But then when I reread it, it's still not even broken up that way, because we kind of drop off from the mother and bring in the boy in the middle of chapter 7, which is still in part 1. Like, that's where the motion sickness came from. That was like, I think my only frustration with the book, to be completely honest, was like, I just feel like there were so many tendrils of plot and characters that weren't braided back into each other until the very, very end.
Yeah, it kind of reads almost like a memoir, but I know it's only like semi-autobiographical. Like, we know that Ocean, he is like a Vietnamese American, like immigrant who lived in Hartford, Connecticut. He's queer and he's a writer, and like Little Dog is a writer. But like I've listened to or watched like interviews with him where he talks about it, and he, you know, he doesn't want to like explicitly say, of course, like what is real, what's not, because he just wants it to be a story itself, and he came into it like this is a work of fiction. But I think the like fragmented parts of it, I think what I found so cool and interesting about it is because it's written as like a letter to his mother, but his mother being illiterate, there's like a slim chance she's ever actually going to come across this. So I feel like it's kind of his way of like processing and articulating these like difficult memories. And so I feel like as I was reading it, it just kind of felt like it was almost like his diary entries or like stream of consciousness. Like, now this story is coming to me and I'm going to write about it because it's like this memory that I want to include. That's kind of how I feel like it took me like halfway through the book to be like, okay, I feel like that's kind of where we're going here, where he's just like recalling something. And so, and then he's like remembering this about Trevor. And then he's remembering this story from his grandmother that his grandmother like shared with him and stuff. So I wanted to add this in because we like mentioned Tiger Woods and then we moved on from it. But I wanted to just like read a quick quote to give context about like why he brought up Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
So basically the reason he brought it up like essentially is because Tiger Woods is a direct product of the war in Vietnam. It says that his father, Earl Dennison Woods, was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, and he was stationed in Thailand. And there he met, I'm going to butcher this, but Kultida Punsawad, a Thai native and secretary for the U.S. Army office in Bangkok. After dating, they moved to Brooklyn, and then they got married. Earl returned to Vietnam for a final tour right before American involvement, and in the conflict began to decline. By the time Saigon fell, Earl officially retired from military service to begin his new life, and most important, raise his new son, born only 6 months after the last U.S. helicopter lifted from the American embassy in Saigon. And then I think this is interesting because it brings up like how he got the nickname Tiger. The boy's birth name, according to an ESPN profile I read a while back, was Eldrick Taunt Woods. His first name, a unique formulation of the E in Earl and ending in the K in Coltita. His parents, whose home in Brooklyn was often vandalized due to their interracial marriage, decided to stand at each end of their son's name like pillars. Eldrick's middle name, Taunt, or Tont, T-O-N-T, is a traditional Thai name given to him by his mother. However, shortly after his birth, the boy obtained a nickname that would soon become famous across the globe. Eldrick Tiger Woods, one of the greatest golfers in the world, is like you, Ma, a direct product of the war in Vietnam. So that's just give some context there. So I feel like once that kind of gave me a better sense of like, I feel like the rest of it. But I do agree. I was like, I don't understand what part 1, part 2, and part 3. There's no rhyme or reason with these. That's fine. But yeah, I do think that's a question of like, I don't know why you did that, but I'm just gonna go with it.
Yeah, I love that though. That it's very stream of conscience. It's very diary. It was almost like a trauma processing of trauma. It felt like too.
What do you think are the connecting factors of like him bringing up addiction and Vietnam War, of violence and trauma?
Well, of course, like with young people is like so tragic when, you know, they do become addicts, and there's a lot of talk of mental illness because of his grandma and his mom. To me, I feel like he brought it up just as like letting his mom know that like these tragic things are happening in my life and a lot of tragic things have happened in your life. To me, that is another like we're all connected. Like we all like experience pain and we turn to things to help us cope with them. And but yeah, it just so happens to be that he did have a lot of friends who were going through some really serious issues. So it just feels like he's surrounded by it, which is, I'm sure, traumatic for himself as well. I feel like nowadays, especially, a lot of people like to play like oppression Olympics, where it's like, well, because I'm this part of this marginalized community, I have it worse than you. Or it's like, well, I have this and this, so things are worse for me. And it's like, things can be worse for people for other reasons, not just because, you know, like me, not just because I'm Asian and I'm a woman, or that like this person is gay, but they're white, but they're poor, but this person is all three. And so they have the blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all of those can be true, but also people can be going through really tragic things in their life that have nothing to do with that. And even if they seem like the most privileged person in the world, but they're going through something really serious, that's still valid to add up. And I think another way to just show it's like, yeah, we're all suffering under everything, like gesticulates to everything happening in the world today. And I feel like that was another theme that just kind of like I just feel like there's so much that he says and just about like the state of our country and the state of just how America has really fucked over these other countries and just like what that means to him and just seeing it happen in real time. Just like, okay, like how colonization is such a huge, like, it's just like so many like big picture things that he can just kind of narrow in on his specific experience, but to say like, yeah, this happens a lot and it's wrong and someone needs to say it, but he doesn't want to say it in that way. He wants to just like write about it how he wants to write about it. And so it comes in the form of poetry. And his just like, you know, his novel, it's just his way of kind of dealing with it.
Yeah, I listened to an audiobook both times. And it was very beautiful. I actually thought
he's a narrator.
He narrates it, yeah.
Because his voice
stunning.
Is.
But I actually thought it was, when I first listened to it, I thought it was a book of poetry. I imagined he wrote it like as a poem and then just like didn't do any of the visual breaking in the book or whatever. I think that is one thing that I missed out on listening to the audiobooks is like not being able to see the visual choices that he made.
Yeah.
Like that's my first time seeing that.
Yeah, because the way he breaks it up, even just like paragraphs, and then of course his chapters, because for the most part the chapters are really short, which I like. I don't like long chapters because it gives you short ones just give you it's easier to just like read a little bit here and there without getting lost. But yeah, I found the where he's describing Trevor and it's all written like a poem. It's like I don't know if you remember that part where it'll just be like details about him and it's just like all you need to know about Trevor in just I mean it's it's like 6 pages and it like reads like a poem because of the way he like spaced it out. It's so beautiful. I was like that's why he's like truly just like a poet through and through. He uses it again when he like finds out about his friends who have passed away from like drug overdoses and it's like it's him talking to his ma. Well I said ma because he starts at dear mom his mother. It's basically like dear mom, like let me begin again, I'm writing because it's late. Later on, he's like 7 of my friends are dead, 4 from overdoses, 5 if you count Xavier, who flipped his Nissan doing 90 on a bad batch of fentanyl. Like, that's just so tragic. And it's the same kind of thing where he's like breaking it up about just like, so yeah, this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. And that's why you maybe haven't heard from me in a while. And it's just like, again, so sad, but he doesn't need to go into so much detail because he can just say something like so tragic, just in one sentence, just be like, by the way, mom, my friends just died. And it's like, oh, okay. And it's like a lot, but I just think his formatting is really brilliant because it just makes sense. This book is only 242 pages and he like really packs a punch in with his writing. It's just something you really want to take your time with it because it needs to sit with you for you to fully understand it, and it's not something you want to rush through.
There's this quote that there's 2 quotes and I am linking them in the show notes, the videos that are there from. The one is from this like big interview he did with Louisiana something. I'll tell you what it is. Some Louisiana channel. Yeah, Louisiana channel. I don't understand. But the state of Louisiana's channel. He was talking about teaching because he teaches poetry and he teaches writing on the college level. And he explains that like it doesn't really, and I'm paraphrasing, but it doesn't really matter what the intention is or how he did the thing. The goal always with writing is for the reader to walk away with more of themselves, knowing more of themselves, being more full of themselves, not in like an egocentric way, but like, being filled, a better understanding of who they are. And and he was like, that's all we can hope for. And then in an interview he did with Seth Meyers, he explained with this book specifically, he wanted to start with truth and end with art. And I love both of those perspectives because I think bottom line is I did walk away feeling a lot of things. And there was this interesting review by Roxane Gay, who is a feminist writer, wonderful writer and thinker. And she was explaining how much she loves Ocean Vuong, but that like there wasn't enough story in the book, and that was kind of hard for her, but it was still incredible. And then she said this thing in her review, I believe, that Ocean Vuong writes about sex better than anyone else she's ever read. And I thought that as well. I walked away being like, whoa, that's true. Like a lot of the times we read stuff and it just feels like gratuitous. And I'm like, you're just writing that to write about it. There was purpose with every single line he had about his sexual experiences that spoke to like we could go into the layers of all of it if we wanted to get really explicit, but like spoke to like the pain of being a person and having to fit into this place and to be this person. Like there was just so much there that I was like, and that to me was that I don't need to know like the devices he used and all those things, But I walked away knowing more about myself after reading those things where I was like, whoa, that is complicated. That is messy. Yeah.
I like that. And actually, as you were talking about, I just feel like there are parallels between like being an immigrant, being an immigrant in a new place, not belonging, and needing to take up space. Otherwise, you'll like disappear. You know, you need to like take up space, and at the same time, there are parallels with sex as well, like needing to make sure you take up space there too, so that you don't disappear. You need to enter a new situation, and I'm sorry.
No, but you're right though. Yeah, what was your reaction to all of that, Alyanna?
Yeah, I felt the same with like reading his like the sex scenes in the book. I was like, it truly was like unlike any other writer, like that I had, like I was like, I've just never come across a sex scene that's written like this before. Like in a way, like you said, it's like not gratuitous. It's not like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of these more like smutty books and stuff, it's like, okay, I'm like really like you're getting the details, but in this one it's like not, it's like the different kind of details, if that makes sense.
It wasn't about arousing the reader at all.
It was just like, this was this visceral experience, and like this is how, and I was just like, whoa, you like really feel for both of them. Like I just like them like both of them exploring this for the first time. And then I feel like that was just so heartbreaking to me, where he was like, so do you think this is just like a phase? And to him he's like, this is my life. And then Trevor's just like, oh, this is like I'm gonna get better, he says. Like, oh, so sad. But I think for me, I'm such a fan of like coming of age stories, and this really like, and now we're at that part where he's like a teenager. It's like his first love, his first job even, and just him exploring this. But I felt like a lot of times with stories about like queer identities, we're definitely getting better at it, but a lot of it is just like so tragic, and them feeling like shame about like coming to terms with their identity. But I feel like with this, it was very much just like he had one uncomfortable conversation with his mother, but I felt like because her language is so limited too, I think it was just something they could kind of like, and now you know this about me, I'm being honest, and we can kind of just move on. I think with this letter, he is able to be so like raw and honest with these like retelling of these memories, like especially with his relationship with Trevor, because he kind of knows it's like, she's never actually going to read this. But my way of just being honest with her and like recounting these like memories and experiences, just so it's kind of like on the page, and his way of processing it. So I just thought that was really well done.
I agree.
I came across a review that talked about Roxane Gay's review of the book, and about how it didn't feel very cohesive. But for this reviewer, they said that the novel didn't necessarily need a cohesive storyline. To me, it was like standing outside someone's house looking through a window, but the action isn't taking place right there. It's actually taking place in the room on the side of the door, so you're only getting the briefest glimpse and taste of what's going on. It's not a full picture, and it's never going to be a complete picture, and you're still one step removed.
Yeah, I really love that, because I think it's really accurate. I feel like with some writers, I feel like they really use flowery language to try to like just make it like wordier, basically. What I find so cool about his writing is like everything is flowery but succinct, where it's like in just one sentence he can say something so profound, and he doesn't need like a whole paragraph to explain it. He just, the way he said it is just like, okay, you just said a lot right there, but, and then we can move on, because he's like, I said what I said. And that's why I feel like his poetry is so strong, and I feel like he can really write about anything.
Why do you think that Ocean Vuong, before I move on to another question, did you have any other thoughts, Eden?
No.
Follow up with Alyanna? Okay.
I apologize for my double entendre.
Oh, stop. But now you're pulling out those literary words. So I think it's a win-win. But my question is, why do you think that Ocean Vuong chose to have, and maybe you just answered it, Alyanna, but why the mother? Why not, like, why is the protagonist writing letters to his mother? Why isn't it just a diary? Or why isn't it just to the grandmother even, or to like future posterity or other kids like me, like other Asian Americans? Why to his mother? And that's like, I don't have a good answer. I just am curious because it's not like she's ever going to read it. And also the thread, once again, like, it's not like he's trying to understand his mother better through his relationship with Trevor. That's not what it felt like. I don't feel like there was any of those moments, which I would have loved. But like, there wasn't there was just like those fragments like we talked about. So why was it important that this goes to his mother? I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like, to me, it was obvious that they had a very complicated relationship. Yeah. She was abusive at times, and his grandmother was the one to kind of like protect him from that. And I think this was just him, now that he's like in his 20s, just kind of, I'm sure, like literally like having the language now to like understand the mental illnesses like in his family. Like his grandma was schizophrenic, his mom obviously suffering from like severe PTSD from her childhood in Vietnam, and like essentially she's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering it right, but like it was like an American raid that had bombed her school, which is why she, that was the end of her schooling, was when she was like 7 years old. And so I feel like him writing this was just kind of his way, like in a way it did feel like diary-esque, but I don't know if it was like a sense of closure exactly, but just,
could be.
I think him just coming to terms with like, I was raised by you and a grandmother, and like I understand that like language is limited here, but with that like limited understanding, I'm trying to make sense of like what it was like for me. And above all, he does have this deep love for his mom and his grandma. He was the one who was, kind of had to be the like parental figure because he was the only one who knew English. And so going out into the world, he's the one that has to, help his mother and grandmother go through life and like their jobs, and he needs to be the translator. And I feel like I'm rambling at this point.
No, you're not rambling. No, I think this all makes sense. I think I'm realizing now too, I do think that like that's probably why Trevor was in the story, was also to show the parallel of Trevor and his dad and mother, that there was a parallel, even though they had different pasts, different contexts, that Trevor was also kind of abused and had a complicated relationship with his father, and his mother was gone, and little dog's dad was gone. And like, I do think that served to say like that we're all experiencing pain. And I think that's what a lot of those experiences showed, but there's also pleasure within that. And I think that's what a lot of the sexual scenes were about too. But I think you're right. I think it was closure, and I think it was closure to his mom and processing to her.
Yeah, I agree with what Alyanna said. Just he finally has the language to, the words to put to what he has felt growing up. And this is probably, in a way, like yearning for that language and understanding from his mother. And perhaps that is why he addressed them to his mother, of like, I know you won't actually read this, but like, let's pretend you can.
Yeah.
And when we pretend that you can.
Yeah, there was like that really sweet moment towards the end where he says something about like the afterlife, and like maybe in another life you will come across this and you will know how to read it. And I was like, that part was just like, that is so tender, because it's like him being like yearning and like hoping that, even though that was there, I feel like the way he's writing it is like, well, maybe there is a chance, like, in another life she could finally understand me and like learn more about me, because I never shared this information. Like, I'm sure she had no idea who Trevor was, or the fact that he died from like an opioid addiction, and just all of his friends who had died from those too, and like how tragic that was.
Yeah.
But he just didn't know how to tell his mom those things. And so I feel like, well, here all of it is. Maybe one day, you know, in another life, you'll read this and then we can. I was like, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful. I forgot about that part. That is so beautiful.
There's this, I think it was This American Life. I don't remember. It must have been This American Life, but it was about a son and his Chinese father. And they moved to the United States and they decided to just teach the son English and not to teach him Chinese at all. But that meant that he did not know how to talk to his dad. And for 20 years, he and his dad never talked.
Oh.
And like, he did have a younger brother, and like they kind of remedied that, and they're like, oh wait, that was a bad idea. So we're going to this brother to speak Chinese. And so literally he's on the outskirts, not being able to talk to his father. His dad had to move back to China, so his dad wrote a letter in Chinese to his son. And just like first time in 20 years, it was the first time he heard his dad say that he loved him through an interpreter. And just like realizing that like in those moments where he didn't know if his dad was even thinking about him, like he was thinking about him every day. Like, and he said that all in this letter, and they just like exchanged letters while his dad was living in China, and they did a phone call too, with a translator. But it was just like those moments of missed communication. And even with speaking the same language, there are moments like that too, of just, this is tricky because I know my parents listened to this. So I'll say it anyway, you know? But like the movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, just like really spoke to me and my sisters as well. My sisters bravely watched that movie with my parents. And like both of my sisters were in tears by the end, and just like looking at each other like, oh my gosh, like this movie like totally gets me, and blah blah blah. And then my mom was like sitting back there behind them, was like, I don't get it. And it's just like, holy cow, like this like missed connection, and just like that, but that yearning for connection. And then just further reason why probably Ocean addressed this to his mother instead of as a journal.
Yeah, love that. I think that's a universal feeling, that misconnection with parents, but then it's heightened, I think, also with the immigrant experience with language. And I also get the feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, I am a white girl with only the experiences of being a white American. But it feels like that's also a really common experience in Asian American families specifically. Is that like, that miscommunication or misunderstanding of culture and being torn between so many cultures and figuring out how to talk about it. Ocean Vuong said also in the Louisiana Channel interview that he's very aware that even when he uses the word "the," it's coming from an Asian American perspective. And so everything that he's saying is coming from this very specific perspective, even if it's just like an article like that. I love that. And because that's how he kind of led into the fact that like, so people will misunderstand and misinterpret, but as long as they walk away feeling more of themselves by my writing, that's all that matters. And maybe that's also the goal with his mother, the fictional protagonist's fictional mother, is that she'll walk away knowing herself better too.
Good question.
Yeah, I feel like with this, well, I feel like there were so many times I wanted to not interrupt, but I was like, I also have something to add when you're talking about everything.
Go wild, Alyanna, right now. Yeah.
Because at least like for me personally, my parents immigrated from the Philippines when my mom was pregnant with me. And so my older sister was 2. My mom came like literally to like Chicago from the Philippines in like the winter of Chicago. And, like she was alone, like it was just her, she was pregnant. My dad and my sister came later, but you know, once like me and my brother came along, my parents like made the executive decision not to teach us Tagalog. They, you know, for them, they just wanted us to have perfect English. And so my sister can understand a little bit because she was born there and she like first 2 years of her life were there. But for me and my brother, it's like we didn't know anything. And it wasn't until we were older that my parents like really regret that, like that we aren't all like bilingual. And like my brother and I, like we all took like some, you know, introductory like Tagalog like 101, 102 classes like in college, but it's just like it's not the same. And I feel like at least for me, I feel like I've always like struggled with like my language classes. It was one of those where it's like this is just an elective and I have a lot of hard classes to focus on. And so I can't give this the time and attention it needs. But it is sad that like I can see that my parents regret that. And I feel like I'm just like, well, it's your fault. Like we all could have been bilingual. But it is just, I feel like that's such a common thing. And my parents, luckily they grew up also like learning English. So that was never like a language barrier for any of us. And, you know, they have nearly perfect English, but it was like when I went back to the Philippines, like a couple months ago, just seeing how much more themselves my parents could be in Tagalog was just like kind of heartbreaking, but also beautiful. Like I just know that it's things like you'll never know how funny I am because in English, like it doesn't translate. And like it's like my humor doesn't, like things like that, where I was just like, you don't really see it until like you see like your family's surrounded by them. And I think with this story in particular, like that makes it even more heartbreaking because they have no family to return to. They really are just like, it's the mother and the grandmother. The grandmother has passed away. So it's really just the mother like alone in this experience. There was just so many heartbreaking moments like in it for me. It does feel like this universal like experience with just like this difference of like not only like generational differences, but like an added layer of like cultural differences of just feeling torn from, you know, feeling not Asian enough or not white enough. And I feel like we are seeing a lot more stories like that. Like, and also when I was rereading this, I don't know if either of you have watched Dee Dee yet. It's
not yet, but I want
to. Both. Not yet.
It's one that I'm like, I don't want to say anything about it. So you two watch it and we can talk about it later.
Okay.
Sounds good.
It has like similar themes of just a Taiwanese American boy, and he's raised by his mom, and his grandmother also lives there. And it's definitely more of a coming of age, definitely more humor and comedy but it does have those like small like heartbreaking moments where he is trying to like connect. And, you know, as a teenage boy, there's just so much of like, you know, he's going through puberty and he wants to fit in with his friends, and he's embarrassed by like his mom and like things like, and it's just like, oh, there's so many themes that I was thinking about when I was rereading this book. But that's another movie that I was like, highly, highly recommend to everyone.
I love that. I will watch it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I will. And I will report back to you for sure.
Please do.
What's causing the rise in book banning? On my podcast, Velshi Banned Book Club, I speak with authors of banned books to try and find out.
I think what they're really objecting to is that a young person has perceived the hypocrisy and corruption of the generation that has created their world.
This book saved me in a lot of ways, and then I published it hoping to help people find a blueprint to heal.
Season 2 of Velshi Banned Book Club. Listen now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Something you said, Alyanna, that gave me chills and is like going to stay with me for a long time is just like, you didn't know how funny they were, like about your parents, or like they don't know how funny you are. Like that language barrier, you'll never really know that person. And that was like, whew, that is a lot to hold on to as a person.
And, you know, I can like hear, it's not like, you know, I think my parents are lame or anything.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't see them laugh as hard as they laugh when they're with their friends and family. Like, I just don't see that side of them. Like, you don't see them just like being completely themselves until they can just like commune with their friends and family in their native language. And it is, you know, it's like beautiful for me to see it, but it's also so sad for me to see that. Like, you can't talk to me like that. Like, we can't talk to each other like that.
Yeah.
Like, and understand each other like almost entirely. You know, I can talk to my parents about anything, but it's just witnessing that, I think, was just like, it's like, I'm just never going to know them on that level. And that's, you know, I've like come to terms with it. But yeah, just seeing it happen in real time, I'm just like, it also just made me think that like, you guys need to go back more often.
Yeah.
You gotta talk to them more. Like, just go back. It's fine. It's like a very real experience. And yeah, I feel like it's very true to like Asian American, like child of immigrants. Like yeah, I feel like that's a very common thing for all of us.
Yeah.
I think so. I know this is like a wild generalization, but I often...
We're still here for it, you know?
We're here for it.
Some people. We're ready.
I feel envious of Latinos because I feel like they hold on to their culture and their language so well. And like, I'm just like over here, I'm just like, all right, let's skedaddle.
Yeah.
But like to be able to see like my see friends or like even just like strangers on the street, like be able to like talk to each other, commune. I like the word that you used, Alyanna, like commune with each other in their native tongue, and me wanting that because like technically English is my third language, but I've forgotten Mandarin. I am rusty in Cantonese. And in fact, like when people talk to me in Spanish, because I took Spanish in high school, it triggers like the same learning brain as my Mandarin Chinese brain. So like I'll like mix up Spanish and Mandarin, which is funny. And I'm just like, okay. And so like people will say like, oh, like they'll say like, oh, thank you in Chinese. And in my head, I'm like, de nada. Maybe if my parents didn't move to like predominantly white community, I would think. I actually grew up in Ridgefield, Connecticut, so like not very far from Hartford. Yeah. And actually like the first place we lived in Connecticut was Farmington, which is just outside Hartford, and we moved to the west side of Connecticut. But like I wonder if I had if I grew up in Flushing, like could I have maintained that because I was more ingrained in culture and language and all of that. Instead, when I go to like Chinatown in any place I'm visiting, the only thing I can say really is like, dan tat, a lot. Like, I want a lot of egg tarts. Bring them my way, like, you know?
Yeah, I feel the same. I mean, I grew up like in Amish country, Pennsylvania, so there was a handful of Asian people in my whole school. I feel like I grew up like very white, and so yeah, I definitely resonate with that too, Eden, with just like growing up in like predominantly white neighborhoods. There's not really any opportunity for you to meet other people to try to like practice the language or anything. It's really just at home, and with my parents both working full time, it's not like they have the time to try to teach us those things other than just like cooking the food at home.
Yeah.
I feel like I have that tie to it like pretty well, but other than that, like not so much.
Yeah. In that same interview with Seth Meyers, Ocean Vuong said that he could have set the book in Mars or something else. You know, it could have been anywhere, but it really mattered to him that it was about an Asian American grappling with identity. And I think that it achieved that purpose, that intention was met.
One thing that I really appreciated from the book is Ocean opening my eyes to how much violence is in our language itself.
Yes, that's another one. Well, you can go.
Yeah. Just like how anytime someone does something successful, we're like, oh man, you killed it. Like you crushed it. Just all of this violent language. And that was one takeaway that I didn't expect to take away from this book, is just trying to pacify my language a bit more.
Yeah. And I think it also comes back to just like him as like a queer person and having this relationship with a boy, and just like how toxic masculinity is. It's just like they, you know, they're gay and he talks the way he does, and he was made fun of because of it, because masculinity is a prison, and like boys do use that kind of language with each other, and they, you know, are taught to be tough and not to cry, and like they play violent video games and are violent amongst each other. And it's like, yeah, maybe let's like not talk like that and not use that kind of language in front of our children, because they're going to use it and just become desensitized to actual violence if they're just like, oh, you're killing it, like you nailed that, you blah blah blah. And it's like, let's just yeah, I feel like I find myself doing that too, because it's like, that's what, you know, but it's like, maybe just say, oh, well done.
Yeah. Exactly. Good job.
Good job. But yeah, I thought thank you for bringing that up, because that was also something I wanted to bring up and I forgot to. But
is there anything else you wanted to bring up?
I'm trying to find it. It's like my favorite quote. Okay, so this is just after he spoke about like Trevor dying. Oh, he like had a dream 3 weeks after Trevor died. And then he just brings this up after that. I'm also going to butcher this because it's in Vietnamese. But he says, in Vietnamese, the word for missing someone and remembering them is the same. No, NHO. Sometimes when you ask me over the phone, Con no me Kong, I flinch thinking you meant, do you remember me? I miss you more than I remember you. And I just was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, that is so, again, I was like so tender and like, it's just like another example of like why he, like, I just love his writing, just saying like, oh, I miss you more than I remember you. Like, are you kidding me?
I'm really grateful for both of your like stories and vulnerability and sharing and relating. I think is so rich. And I think that is why books matter, because it allows for conversations like this. And I have learned so much. I'm curious why the Asian American experience with language is so niche compared to other immigrant groups.
Quick plug, a recommendation.
Plug all the things, Alyanna. Plug them.
I feel like a good book, if you, like, if that is something you want to into. What is it? Wow, I'm already blanking on the name. Minor Feelings. A Reckoning of Race and the Asian Condition. It's a book by Kathy Park Pong.
Okay.
And that book like wrecked me. I think it's so in the best possible, but it is very much just like, oh, like this is speaking to like the Asian American experience in such like a, she's so honest with it. There are times where you really have to sit back and be like this is one where I was like, anyone who knows a single Asian American person in their life, which you do because I'm talking to you, it's like, you need to read this book. It's just
I'm getting it on right now. I'm on Libby and we're downloading it as we speak.
Excellent. But yeah, I do think since you know, I was like, well, if you do want to learn about it, here's a book for you.
Yeah, I do care because I am curious. So I'm going to read that. Downloaded. Oh, yeah, Dee,
watch Dee.
Send me all the recommendations. Okay, so to wrap up, why do we think this book is banned? I'll go first. I think it is the sex scenes, and I think it is there's like a lot of war conversations, some violence. Those are my thinkings. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's the sex.
Yeah. Maybe like sex, like the war, so it's like controversial topics perhaps.
Yeah.
And then like drug addiction, because they
yeah, right, didn't even think about that. Yeah,
opioids. Yeah.
So those are my guesses.
Didn't even think about it. Like drugs, whatever. Honestly, we haven't had a lot of the bannings really aren't about drugs. Like they'll bring it in, but it's never like the big main thing. I don't know why that is. Are we just all more? I don't know.
I have no idea.
And like also like queer stories, because like
right, totally. Oh, Alyanna,
we're reading so much of this that we're just like, oh, it doesn't. Yeah.
Are there any other books? Has anyone written anything else? That is true. That is like most of the books are banned because they are queer stories. And that is why we're reading them.
I was like, yeah, sex. I was like, oh wait, it's queer sex.
Yeah.
So so much
more. Yeah, double trouble. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're so woke, we don't even notice.
Yeah.
Sad. Maybe because the bannings are so new. Maybe we should go in and edit it.
This was banned 2023 in Texas, like Alyanna mentioned. Oh, it's just like it needs to go in through an informal review.
Oh.
There.
What does that mean? Does that mean it's still kind of, it hasn't been like officially banned, but it's being challenged kind of thing?
Did I just pick a book that wasn't even banned?
Of all the books in the world, Alyanna. No, it
was banned in Vietnam.
Whoa.
That's
okay.
Too.
That's really interesting.
Okay, for pornographic content, I said. Pornographic.
Do you think, I'm curious how it got banned in Texas or how the conversation started in Texas, because I want to know what parent read it or who read it and was like, this is, because you have to kind of like search this book out. I don't like, it's at bookstores, obviously, but like, I don't feel like it's like in the pop culture commentary. Like, I don't think people are talking about making a movie.
It's not A Court of Thorns and Roses.
No. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Or It Ends With Us, which is like, like it's not part of any sort of dialogue outside of like book nerds.
All the teenagers are like reading it. And
right.
So we got up to this. It is one that it's like, it's not like a wildly known one.
No.
So because it was Ocean Vuong himself, that's how I found out that it had been banned. Like, he had posted it himself.
He's the one banning it. Can you imagine? He's like, this weird book, my book got banned. He's so
like
crazy.
Showing up at a parent-teacher conference or PTA thing with like a wig on. Is like, I don't like this book. just
people who fake their death so that their art sells. He's like, maybe more people should talk about it. I don't know.
Okay, the reasons cited for the bans range from the book's explicit language and sexual content to its exploration of controversial topics. Interestingly enough, no one's mentioning LGBTQ.
Maybe it was like a queer person who read it, and so that wasn't the issue, but they were offended by the language.
Yeah.
Sexual, yeah.
I hate to say it, but the queer community is not a monolith.
Yeah.
They're all
true.
But also, I love that I just created that story, because it's probably not true, but I just had to create that story. Pulled a JD Vance just now.
Yeah.
So everyone can understand what we're talking about.
Let's change the verb for lie to JD Vance. I just JD Vanced right there. Like,
I just did something mean. Okay. I love that. I feel like I don't have closure about this banning at all, and I'll just have to sit with that. I think we all have to sit with that. But I do believe it's getting banned.
I promise I read that it was.
Oh no, yeah. It was banned from Texas. Yeah.
I just want to know.
Texas.
I know, it's really interesting. There's like not much other information.
It must just be the first one, but also school just started, so maybe this year more thing. I don't know. I'm just saying stuff at this point. Book banners are such wild cards for me, because you just never know.
They are.
No, like I never understand like how it just like starts. I'm like, oh, it's so fascinating to me.
It is really interesting. I wonder.
Pissed off, and then they bring it to the school board. Like, I just like don't understand how the process.
It's like really ironic too, because they'll take these passages out of context. Like even in the Utah like sensitive, or it's not sensitive materials. It might be sensitive materials law or whatever bill. They printed out these sexual passages out of context. Yeah. And they're on like little boards. I'm like, oh, so like, but you're doing the exact thing the bill is banning, which is distributing pornographic material. And here you are posting these huge fonted things.
I saw those and they just like were so funny to me.
Yeah.
Literally this giant poster behind them, like explicit detail. I think it was like a Sarah Jane that was like behind them with just like blocked out like parts.
I didn't see this at all.
I mean, I'm reading enough of it that this is like an explicit sex. I was like, why is this behind you? Like, doing this, I don't know, presentation that you're getting. It was wild to me. I was like, it was a crazy picture just to like have like someone talking about it with this behind them.
Yeah.
This whose idea was this? Like,
that's their like new profile picture.
Yes. Take that and run with it. And like, I was like, you gave it to them. Like, it's right there.
They didn't even have to buy the book. They didn't have to do anything.
Yeah. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Another funny thing about Utah is the Salt Lake Tribune finally like put a number to how much banning books is costing the state.
Yeah, I read
it's like $23,000 per book, and that includes, get this, that includes purchasing the book for review for each of the members.
So we're helping sales.
Yep, we're helping sales. Like, it's just wild. Wild.
Gosh, I love that fact. That's so amazing. Yeah. All these people who would never have read it before, like they're
and they're like buying it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, someone will have to read this and like pinpoint all the things. It's like, so you're gonna it's so stupid. Like,
yeah,
it's very asinine. It's a really interesting way to spend time. That's all I got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. That's my like. You just have all the time to read these books, I guess.
Yeah,
that you don't want to read, and that's like
you don't want to read, and then you're complaining about them.
Yeah,
and like, you want the kids to read, and it's like
what a way to live. And I know that's a judgment call on my part, but truly, if my life was reading stuff I hated and being mad about it,
complaining about it,
that'd be truly miserable. I'm not using my agency, autonomy, not using any of the freedoms that I have in this country.
That you have for season 3, and I'm like, shocked that some of these. I was just like, wait, we're going to talk about Twilight?
We're going to talk about Twilight.
I'm so excited about that.
I know. Isn't that fascinating? It's banned like a lot.
And like Bridge to Terabithia, Gossip Girl, that's hilarious to me. I
know. I cannot wait to read Gossip Girl. I really think it's going to get me through winter. I think I'm going to read all of them. There's like 500 books or something.
There's so many. I remember, what's funny is I remember my sister reading them. And at the time she was like, you can't read these. Like, these are too mature for you. Yeah. And you should just stick to the click books. And I feel like by the time I was like old enough to read Gossip, like had no interest. Yeah. But I remember she had the whole series and loved it.
Oh my god!
So I might join you on that ride. We're just like starting to read.
You should, because honestly, I think it could be a delight. I think it could be. Okay, I have to go now.
Well, we got to close the episode.
We have to close the other
okay, so the closing basically is like, thank you, Alyanna, for coming on our show. Very excited that we got to talk to you about this book.
This was so
fun. To everyone else, we're reading Persepolis next. The whole series. 4 volumes if you're French, 2 if you're American.
By Marjane Satrapi.
Thank you. By Marjane Satrapi. And rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, because that helps keeps us on the charts and stuff.
Yeah.
Keeps us on Apple's radar.
Yay.
Yeah.
Do you have any final words, Ollie?
Everyone watch Dee Dee.
Yep, there you go.
Read Minor Feelings.
I feel like no, it's fine. You don't have to follow me on things. I do have a Substack newsletter.
Oh, yes.
That it's called To Ami with Love. It started out as like a newsletter dedicated to BTS and like my love of K-pop and why they basically just like, I talk about like racism in pop culture as well, and just why they seem to be like blowing up everywhere else in the world, except it took them so long to get big in America. And it's racism. And I kind of like go from there. So I feel like that's how it started. And then I mostly talk about other like cultural commentary, my reviews for like movies and books and just like random pop culture things. And it kind of morphed into like other stuff because it kind of reached the point where I was like, well, now everyone in my life knows who BTS is, so my work here is done. So let's just it's like genuinely how it started. It was just like nobody knows who they are, and like they're mean to me when I talk about them, and they don't take them seriously, and it makes me upset. So I'm gonna write about it. And then I feel like it just kind of morphed into other stuff because I was like, well, my work here is done. But yeah, we don't have to plug that.
I think we should, though. Honestly, I think that's if
fun.
You're comfortable with it, I'd like to plug your Substack. Absolutely. I don't have any other last words other than thank you so much. This was like such a fun conversation and so interesting.
Burn This Book is produced by us, Nicola Corin and Eden Wen.
Music by myself, Nicole, and performed by my dad, Frank.